Now, for an in-depth conversation about all things pertaining to NELFUND is Akintunde Sawyerr. He's the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian Education Loan Fund, that's NELFUND. He joins us now to discuss the operations and the impact of NELFUND beyond the numbers. Good afternoon and welcome to Newsday.
Good afternoon to you. Thank you for having me on Newsday.
Awesome stuff. We always love to hear from you and to hear the progress regarding this great initiative for students. So can you just give us, before we get into the nitty-gritty details, just give us an outlook of some of the progress that's been made and the impact that you feel you have made so far?
Okay. Excellent, and I'm thankful to you that you've described it as a great initiative. It's an initiative of the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. We're grateful, and Nigerian students are grateful for this opportunity. What I will say to you is that great progress has been made. We launched an online platform on the 24th of May 2024 with all the fears and concerns about how that might be taken up, how that might be reacted to by Nigerians. I'm pleased to report that to date we have over 500,000 Nigerian students at tertiary level, both at federal and state government-owned institutions who have registered for this, successfully registered to be part of the scheme. We have over 400,000 students who have successfully applied for the scheme. And of course, that means that we're going through on a constant basis an approval process. To date, we have about 261,000 students who are actually receiving funds, who are beneficiaries of the scheme. We've disbursed 22 billion naira to institutions, the applicable institutions, and we've disbursed 13 billion naira to students as upkeep, and that number goes up on a monthly basis. So that's really the outlook for now. Just one other thing to add. We've paid these funds to 194 institutions across state and federal tertiary level in Nigeria for Nigerian students only.
Impressive figures there, I must say, but let's look at some of the eligibility criteria, especially for the students to qualify for the loan, and what impact would you say that NELFUND has had so far?
Okay, so the eligibility criteria is that you first and foremost must be a Nigerian. The second is that you must have access to tertiary institution using JAMB as your means of access, if you like. The third is that you should have either a matriculation number for the institution that you're in or an admission number to the institution you're about to go into. The fourth, of course, is that it's a loan. Therefore, you must have a bank account and a corresponding BVN so that we can properly receive repayments when it's time for repayments to be received, but more importantly, we can make payments through a formal banking system. That's essentially the eligibility criteria that is required to be part of this great scheme.
All right, let's get into some of the operations because over the past few weeks, we've heard several reports, many of them on social media from students across the country who are saying that there's been a non-disbursement of tuition and in some cases of upkeep allowance as well. I understand there have been a few unofficial responses saying that the issue derives from the institutions themselves and not from NELFUND. Can you address the current sort of lapse that's going on between funds being approved and funds being disbursed to the necessary beneficiaries?
Okay, so I wouldn't necessarily place all of that on the institutions. The truth about this is that we carry out a very strict verification process before we approve. There are obviously some rate limiting steps in that process. One of the ones that does affect the institutions is that once the application process has gone through and we have collated, for example, all the students at University of X or Polytechnic of Y or College of Education of Z, we batch that. Remember, we receive these applications randomly, not by institution. We batch it, send it to the relevant institution and ask them to confirm that these are indeed their students. sometimes there's a lapse in the response coming back to us. That can cause delays. The other thing, of course, is that if the student has filled out any sort of information incorrectly, that can also lead to problems, because if you don't have all the documentation, for example, and all the digits, all the numbers, the verification numbers that are required to go into the system, if those are not entered in full and accurately, it can cause delays. People apply, and of course, if those details aren't there, it never really gets approved. The fact of the matter is that, as I said, 261,000 students have successfully started to receive benefits out of 400,000 applications which we are receiving every day. So in the majority of cases, people are getting paid, people are getting their stipends. Of course, for those who are not, it's hugely frustrating, hugely disappointing, and of course, a lot of noise is therefore made. But one thing I want to assure the general public and the students is that we're working assiduously to ensure that all of these issues are addressed and ironed out. They're bound to be issues, and I'll tell you something, they'll never go away. The more applications we get, the more issues there'll be, the more we'll look at those issues, the more we'll perfect the system or iron out the creases. But of course, you will always get this with any scheme anywhere in the world.
Over 200 universities, you say, have gotten, these loans, especially for the students who are gaining access to higher institutions. But I'm wondering, how do you get these funds? Because we know that when it comes to education in Nigeria, there are still a lot of questions as regards, disbursement of funds. How are these funds coming? And also, how do you deal with issues of risk of the repayment of these loans by the students?
Okay, so how do the funds come in? The students have an opportunity to apply for two types of loans. One is for the institutional fees. When that is approved, the fees are sent directly from the NELFUND account at the Central Bank of Nigeria directly to the institution's account, usually if it's a federal institution, also at the central bank. If it's a state-owned institution, then it might end up in a commercial bank. But the bottom line, the bottom line is that it's sent to the institution for a specific list of beneficiary students who are then allowed to get access to classes, tutorials, examinations, seminars, whatever it is they need to do to get the learning they need to learn. The upkeep loan is sent directly from our account, from the NELFUND account at the Central Bank of Nigeria, directly to a BVN verified account that belongs to the student whose name must tally with the application process. So two lines of disbursement, one to the institution on behalf of the students, the other directly to the beneficiary on their own behalf, and they get that every month, 20,000 naira for one session.
The loan repayment. You've not talked about managing the risk of loan repayment.
Okay, I beg your pardon. So the loan repayments don't start until 2 years after NYSC if the student has a job. If the student has a paying job, they're obliged to start repaying 2 years after NYSC. And even then, they don't pay it themselves. It's the institution that employs them, the employer that deducts 10% of their salary or wages and remits it to the Nigeria Education Loan Fund. In one sense, we're not there yet because nobody's making repayments as yet. But we envisage that the risk will be relatively low because every loan is tied to a NIN, and the institution, the employer will go to a database that will tell them that the person they're about to employ has a loan, and therefore they need to make those remittances back to the NELFUND.
All right. Now, what we noticed, obviously this scheme was rolled out last year, but what stood out was the fact that some regions did not enroll as robustly into this as other regions did. What are some of your efforts to ensure that there's an equitable rollout of these student loans across the country?
Okay, so I spent a lot of time with my team visiting states that haven't been as enthusiastic. We've met with a number of the governors in those states. We've met with the leadership of the institutions and shown them the benefits of encouraging their indigenes, their students, to apply. Now, you're right, in some areas that is less required. In other areas, you need to put in more effort. That's a pretty standard thing with any sort of uptake of any innovation, that some people will run to it, other people will be more reluctant. Whether it's a new iPhone or a student loan scheme, you will get those who naturally want to buy it immediately and others who say, wait, I want to see what it looks like for other people. Our job is to sensitize people in areas where they're reluctant, more so than areas where they're sort of embracing it in full. Our job is to try our best to go and see the leaders, the influencers in areas where there's reluctance, to convince the people that it's a good thing if they need it.
And on that note, we'll wrap up the conversation. Thank you so much for your time on Newsday. Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Nigerian Education Loan Fund, NELFUND, at Akintunde Sawyerr. Thank you for your time.